My son's wedding was supposed to be the proudest day of my life. I raised him alone after his mother left, worked 2 jobs to pay for his college, and when he called to tell me he was getting married, I cried tears of joy. But when I walked into that reception hall and saw every table filled except for the one spot they'd forgotten to save for me, I knew my own family had erased me. What I did next changed everything between us forever. I was sitting at my kitchen table, eating leftover meatloaf and watching the evening news, when my phone rang. It was Michael. My son doesn't call often anymore, maybe once every few weeks, so when I saw his name on the screen, I felt that little flutter of hope I always get. Maybe tonight we'd actually talk for more than 5 minutes. Dad? His voice sounded different, excited, happy in a way I hadn't heard in months. Hey son, how are you doing? Dad, I have news. He paused, and I could hear him taking a breath. Sarah and I are getting engaged. The words hit me like a warm wave. I actually felt my chest tighten with joy. After 32 years of being his father, 24 years of raising him alone after his mother walked out, this was the moment I'd been dreaming about. My boy was going to be married. He'd found someone who loved him. Michael, that's wonderful. My voice cracked a little. I hope he didn't notice. I'm so happy for you both. We're thinking about a spring wedding, nothing too big, but we want to do it right. I was already thinking ahead, my mind racing with possibilities. Spring wedding. That gave us maybe 8 months to plan. I started mentally calculating what I had in my savings account, wondering how much I could contribute without making it awkward. Maybe I could offer to pay for the flowers, or the band, something meaningful that would let me be part of this. If you've ever felt that overwhelming pride when your child reaches a milestone, that moment when all your sacrifices suddenly feel worth it, you'll understand what I was feeling. If this touches something in your heart, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Your support means everything to me. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet kitchen for a long time, just letting the happiness settle over me. My son was getting married, the little boy I'd raised by myself, the kid I'd driven to every baseball practice and parent-teacher conference, was going to be someone's husband. I thought about all those years after Linda, his mother, left us. Michael was only 8 then. One day she was making pancakes on Saturday mornings, and the next day there was just a note on the kitchen counter saying she needed to find herself and couldn't do it here. She couldn't do it with us. I remember Michael asking me for weeks when Mom was coming home. I kept giving him vague answers. She needs some time. She'll call soon. Until finally he stopped asking. He never said it out loud, but I think he understood she wasn't coming back long before I was ready to accept it. Those first few months were the hardest. I was working full-time at the fabrication plant, but the pay wasn't enough to cover everything, so I took a second job cleaning offices downtown, working from 7 to 11 at night after I picked Michael up from the neighbor's house. I'd get home around midnight, exhausted, and still have to help him with homework, or pack his lunch for the next day. I missed things. I missed some of his games because I had to work. I missed school events sometimes, but I tried never to miss the important stuff. His birthday parties, Christmas morning, the day he graduated high school. I was there for those moments, even if it meant taking unpaid time off or asking someone to cover my cleaning shift. Michael never complained. He never asked why other kids had mothers who volunteered for field trips or baked cookies for bake sales. He just adapted, the way kids do. Sometimes I wonder if that's why he grew up so independent, so self-sufficient. Maybe too independent. After that phone call, I couldn't stop smiling. I called my buddy Frank from work and told him the news. Then I called my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who'd helped watch Michael when he was little. Everyone was so happy for us, for him. I started imagining the wedding day, walking Michael down the aisle. Well, I'd be walking him to his place at the altar, since his mother wouldn't be there to give him away. I imagined making a toast at the reception, telling everyone about what a good man my son had become. I pictured dancing with Sarah, welcoming her officially into our small family. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about wedding details constantly. I researched florists online, even though Michael hadn't asked for my help yet. I looked at catering menus and venue prices, trying to get a sense of what everything might cost. I wanted to be prepared when he asked for my input. But when I called him the following week to talk about wedding plans, something felt off. His responses were short, distracted. Have you guys started looking at venues yet? Yeah, we're handling all that. Do you need any help with anything? Dad, we've got it covered. Sarah's really organized. That word, we, not us, meaning me and him. We, meaning him and Sarah. I was outside that we somehow. I told myself it was just wedding stress. Planning a wedding is overwhelming, especially for young people. Michael was probably just focused on making sure Sarah was happy, making sure everything went smoothly. That's what good husbands-to-be do. But late at night, lying in my bed in the same house where I'd said him, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The excitement in his voice when he told me about the engagement, that was real. But everything since then felt different, careful, distant. I thought about the last time Michael had come to visit. It was about 2 months ago, and he'd brought Sarah with him. We'd had dinner together at my kitchen table, and I'd made pot roast, his favorite when he was growing up. But he barely ate, kept checking his phone, and Sarah seemed uncomfortable the whole time. When I showed her photos of Michael as a kid, she smiled politely, but didn't ask questions or laugh at the funny stories the way I thought she would. They left early that night, saying they had to get back to the city. Michael hugged me goodbye, but it felt rushed, obligatory. I pushed those thoughts away. My son was getting married. This was supposed to be the happiest time of our lives. I wasn't going to ruin it by overthinking every conversation or reading too much into his busy schedule. But deep down, in a place I wasn't ready to acknowledge yet, I was starting to understand that the distance wasn't temporary. It wasn't wedding stress or busy schedules. Something had changed between us, and I was just beginning to realize I might not know how to change it back. 3 weeks passed after Michael's engagement announcement, and I still hadn't received a wedding invitation. I wasn't worried yet. I figured they were still working out the details, still deciding on dates and venues. But when I mentioned it to Frank at work, he looked at me strangely. 3 weeks? My daughter sent out save the dates 2 months after she got engaged. That weekend I called Michael. Sarah answered the phone. "Oh, hi, Mr. Davidson." Her voice was pleasant but formal. She used to call me Dad, or at least David. When did that change? "Hi, Sarah. Congratulations again on the engagement. Is Michael around?" "He's in the shower. Can I have him call you back?" "Sure, that's fine." "Hey, Sarah. I was wondering about the wedding plans. Do you know when you might be sending out invitations?" There was a pause. Just a moment, but long enough that I noticed. "We're still finalizing the guest list. It's more complicated than we thought it would be." "Oh, I understand. Big families make it tough, I'm sure." "Well, you know I'm flexible. Whatever works for you two." "Right. I'll have Michael call you." He didn't call back that day, or the next day. When I finally reached him Tuesday evening, he sounded rushed. "Dad, sorry I didn't call back. Work's been crazy." "No problem, son. I was just checking in about the wedding. Sarah mentioned you're still working on the guest list." "Yeah, we're trying to keep it small. You know how expensive everything is." "Of course, I was thinking, if you need help with costs, I'd be happy to contribute something. Maybe I could cover the flowers or the music or—" "Dad, you don't need to do that." "I want to, Michael. This is your wedding. I want to help make it special." "We appreciate that, but we've got it handled." That phrase again. "We've got it handled." Not thank you, not let me talk to Sarah about it. Just a polite dismissal. "Well, if you change your mind, the offer stands. When do you think I might see an invitation?" Another pause. "Soon, Dad. We're trying to figure out the venue situation first." I offered to help with anything. Addressing envelopes, picking up decorations, driving to appointments. Each suggestion was met with the same response. They had it covered. Sarah was handling it. Everything was under control. After we hung up, I sat in my living room feeling strangely empty. I'd raised Michael to be independent, to handle his own responsibilities. I should be proud that he was managing his wedding without needing his father to step in and take over. So why did I feel so unnecessary? I started noticing other small changes. When I called, Sarah never came to the phone anymore to chat. She used to ask about my work, tell me about her job at the marketing firm, share little stories about their apartment. Now, if she answered, she'd just hand the phone to Michael immediately. The conversations with my son got shorter too, where we used to talk for 20 or 30 minutes, about his work, about baseball, about whatever was going on in our lives. Now our calls lasted maybe 5 minutes. He always seemed to be on his way somewhere or expecting someone to come over. When the invitation finally arrived, it was a Thursday evening in late February. I saw the envelope in my mailbox and felt a surge of excitement. Finally, the official invitation to my son's wedding. I carried it inside before opening it, wanting to savor the moment. The envelope was thick, expensive feeling. Sarah probably picked it out. She had good taste, I had to give her that. I opened it carefully, not wanting to tear anything. It was beautiful. Elegant script, high-quality cardstock, a little ribbon tied around the main card. Michael Davidson and Sarah Mitchell request the pleasure of your company. The date was set for April 15th, a Saturday. The ceremony would be at St. Mark's Episcopal Church, followed by a reception at the Riverside Country Club. I read it 3 times, looking for some personal touch, some handwritten note from Michael. Something that acknowledged this wasn't just any wedding invitation. This was a son inviting his father to the most important day of his life. There was nothing. Just the formal printed text, exactly like the invitations that would go to Sarah's college friends and distant relatives. I called to RSVP the next evening. Dad, great, thanks for calling back so quickly. Of course, April 15th, I've already requested the day of. Work. It looks like it's going to be beautiful. Yeah, Sarah did an amazing job with all the planning. The country club looks lovely. I drove by there last weekend just to see it. I paused. Michael, I was wondering, would it be okay if I brought Linda? Linda is my girlfriend of 3 years. She's a kind woman, a widow who understands what it's like to rebuild your life after loss. Michael had met her several times, and they'd always gotten along well. At least, I thought they had. Linda? Michael sounded surprised. I don't know, Dad. We're trying to keep the guest count pretty tight. I understand if space is an issue. I just thought, well, Linda's been part of my life for a while now, and I'd love for her to share this day with us. Let me talk to Sarah about it. I waited 3 days for him to call back. When he finally did, his answer was apologetic but firm. Dad, I'm really sorry, but there's just no room for extra guests. We're already over budget as it is. Extra guests. That's how he referred to the woman who'd been making me dinner twice a week for 3 years, who'd helped me paint my kitchen last summer, who'd listened patiently while I worried about his happiness during his previous breakups. I understand, son. It's your day. I'll be there. Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd understand. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and tried to make sense of what was happening. This was normal, right? Young couples wanted their weddings to be about them, their new life together. Maybe I was expecting too much, wanting too much involvement in something that was really about Michael and Sarah building their own family. But late that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. I was being managed, carefully kept at a certain distance. The enthusiasm in Michael's voice when he'd first told me about the engagement, that felt like it belonged to a different conversation, a different relationship. I thought about Linda's reaction when I told her she couldn't come to the wedding. She'd been disappointed but understanding. It's their day, David. You go and celebrate your son. But I caught something in her expression, a flicker of concern that matched what I was feeling but couldn't name. Are you sure everything's okay between you and Michael? She'd asked gently. Of course. Why wouldn't it be? She'd just squeezed my hand and changed the subject, but her question stayed with me. Was everything okay between Michael and me? When I really thought about it, when I was honest with myself, I couldn't remember the last time we'd had a real conversation. The kind of talk we used to have when he was in high school, when he'd tell me about his dreams and worries and ask for my advice. I couldn't remember the last time he'd asked for my advice about anything. I took the Friday before the wedding off work, something I'd been planning for months. The wedding was on Saturday, 2 hours away in the city where Michael and Sarah lived. I'd booked a room at a modest hotel about 10 minutes from the church. Nothing fancy, but clean and close enough that I wouldn't have to worry about traffic on the big day. The drive down was peaceful. It was early April, and the trees were just starting to bloom. I had my windows cracked, listening to the radio, feeling that mix of excitement and nervousness that comes before important events. My son was getting married tomorrow. In less than 24 hours, I'd watch him promise his life to someone else, start his own family. I checked into the hotel around noon and called Michael from my room. Dad, you're in town already? Just got here. I wanted to make sure I had plenty of time, didn't have to rush in the morning. That's great. How's the hotel? It's fine. Clean bed, decent coffee, all I need. I paused. So, what time is the rehearsal dinner tonight? The silence on the other end lasted just a beat too long. The rehearsal dinner. Yeah, I assume it's tonight, since the wedding's tomorrow. What time should I be there? Oh, Dad. The rehearsal dinner is just for immediate family and the wedding party. I sat down on the edge of the hotel bed, confused. I'm immediate family, Michael. I'm your father. I know, Dad, I know. It's just... Sarah's parents are hosting it, and they wanted to keep it small. Just parents and the people in the wedding. I'm not in the wedding. The words came out before I could stop them. Well, no, we decided to just have our friends as groomsmen and bridesmaids. You know how it is. I didn't know how it was. When I imagined Michael's wedding over the years, I always pictured myself as his best man, or at least standing beside him at the altar. But that was probably old-fashioned thinking. Things were different now. I understand, but surely there's room for one more person at dinner. I could pay for my own meal. Dad, it's already planned. The reservation is set. The menu is ordered. Sarah's mom has been working on this for weeks. Sarah's mom, a woman who'd known my son for 2 years, was planning his rehearsal dinner, and his father, who'd raised him for 30 years, wasn't invited. Okay, I tried to keep my voice steady. Well, I guess I'll see you tomorrow at the church then. Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks for understanding, Dad. After we hung up, I sat in that hotel room for a long time, looking out the window at the parking lot below. Families were checking in for the weekend, parents with kids, grandparents with suitcases, everyone excited about whatever had brought them here, and here I was, alone in a strange city, excluded from my own son's rehearsal dinner. I ordered a pizza that night and watched television until I fell asleep. Somewhere across town, Michael was celebrating with his wedding party, with Sarah's family, with everyone except me. I wondered if anyone asked where his father was. I wondered if Michael even mentioned that I was in town. Around 10 o'clock, I called Linda back home. How's everything going? She asked. Are you having a good time? I told her about the rehearsal dinner situation. She was quiet for a moment. David, something doesn't feel right about this. A father not invited to his son's rehearsal dinner? That's not normal. Maybe things are different now. Maybe modern couples do things differently. Or maybe they're pushing you out, and you're being too polite to see it. Her words hit something in my chest, something I'd been trying not to acknowledge. You think I should drive home tonight? I think you should do whatever feels right to you. But David, if your own son can't make space for you at his rehearsal dinner, I'm worried about what tomorrow is going to feel like. I knew she was right. Some part of me had known it for weeks. But I couldn't leave. I'd spent 30 years showing up for Michael. Soccer games in the rain, school plays where he had 2 lines, graduation ceremonies, college move-in day. I wasn't going to abandon his wedding, no matter how much it hurt to be here. I'm staying, I told her. He's my son. I'll be there tomorrow. I know you will. Just take care of yourself, okay? Don't let them make you feel small. But I already felt small. Sitting alone in that hotel room, eating pizza from a box while my son celebrated without me, I felt smaller than I had in years. I thought about calling Michael back, maybe offering to take him to breakfast in the morning before the wedding, but I didn't want to seem desperate. I didn't want to be the needy father who couldn't respect boundaries. So I went to sleep alone, in a strange bed, in a city where my son lived but had no room for me at his most important celebration. The next morning, I woke up early and got dressed carefully. I'd bought a new suit for this day, navy blue, well-fitted, with a tie that Sarah had once complimented when I wore it to dinner at their apartment. I wanted to look good, wanted Michael to be proud to introduce me as his father. I drove to the church around 10, even though the ceremony wasn't until 2. I thought maybe I could help with setup, or at least see Michael before things got busy. When I walked into the church, I could hear voices coming from somewhere in the back. The wedding party, probably, getting ready for photos and final preparations. I found a young man in a suit who looked like he might be part of the wedding party. Excuse me, I'm Michael's father. Is he around? I thought I might say hello before the ceremony. The young man, one of the groomsmen, I realized, looked uncomfortable. Oh, Michael's pretty busy right now with the photographer and everything. He asked not to be disturbed. I'm not a disturbance, I'm his father. I know, sir, I'm sorry, but he's really focused on getting everything perfect for Sarah. Maybe you could catch him after the ceremony? After the ceremony. when he'd be married, surrounded by guests, pulled in a dozen different directions, when there would be no time for private father-son moments. I walked back to the main sanctuary and sat in one of the pews, watching people set up flowers and arrange chairs. Everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing, exactly where they belonged. Everyone except me. At one point, I saw Sarah's father walk through, carrying a box of programs. He was laughing with someone, relaxed and involved. He belonged here. He had a role to play. I sat there for 2 hours, watching other people prepare for my son's wedding, feeling like a stranger in the most important day of his life. When guests started arriving, I went outside to get some fresh air. That's when I saw them, Michael and Sarah, posing for pictures with her family in the garden behind the church. Sarah's parents, her grandparents, her sister and brother-in-law. They looked like a perfect family portrait. Michael saw me watching and waved, but he didn't invite me over. He didn't ask the photographer to take a few pictures with his father. He just waved and turned back to Sarah's family. I waved back and walked to my car, where I sat until it was time for the ceremony to begin. I didn't trust myself to stay inside and watch more moments that didn't include me. The church was beautiful when I finally walked back inside. White flowers everywhere, candles along the aisle, soft music playing. Sarah had exquisite taste. Everything looked elegant and perfect. I took my seat and waited, trying to push down the growing sense that I was attending someone else's family celebration. But as guests filled the pews around me, I realized something that made my stomach drop. I wasn't sitting where the groom's family should sit. The first 2 rows on the right side, traditionally reserved for the groom's immediate family, were filled with Sarah's grandparents, her aunts and uncles, her family friends. I was in the 3rd row, behind people I'd never met, people who were connected to my son only through his fiancée. I thought about moving forward, claiming one of those front row seats. After all, I was the groom's father. If anyone deserved to sit in the front row, it was me. But the seats were all occupied by elderly relatives who looked settled and comfortable. How could I ask an 80-year-old grandmother to move so I could sit closer? So I stayed in the 3rd row, watching the back of strangers' heads, feeling invisible at my own son's wedding. The ceremony began, and Sarah looked radiant walking down the aisle with her father. Her dress was stunning, her smile genuine. I could see why Michael loved her. But when Michael took his place at the altar, when he looked out at the congregation, his eyes passed right over me. He was focused on Sarah, on their moment, on their new beginning. The minister began the ceremony, and everything was lovely and traditional. But when he got to the part where he typically asks, "Who gives this man to be married?" there was just silence. No one stood. No one spoke. The question was simply omitted, as if my son was giving himself away, as if he'd raised himself, as if he had no father who'd sacrificed and loved and shown up for 30 years. I sat there, feeling erased from his story. During the ceremony, I watched Michael's face as he looked at Sarah. He was so happy, so in love. This should have been the most joyful moment of my life, seeing my son find someone who made him glow like this. Instead, I felt like I was watching it happen to someone else's child. When they were pronounced husband and wife, when they kissed and everyone applauded, I clapped along with everyone else. But my heart wasn't in it. My heart was somewhere else, mourning something I couldn't quite name. After the ceremony, during the receiving line, Michael hugged me briefly. "Thanks for being here, Dad. I wouldn't miss it for the world." But even as I said it, I wondered if I could have missed it. If I had stayed home, would anyone have noticed? Would Michael have looked around and thought, "Where's my father?" Or would the day have proceeded exactly the same way? Sarah hugged me too, polite and warm but distant. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Davidson." Mr. Davidson, not Dad, not even David. Mr. Davidson, like I was a family friend or distant relative. "Congratulations, Sarah, you look beautiful." "Thank you." "Oh, the photographer wants to get some family photos before we head to the reception." Family photos. I started to follow them outside, assuming I'd be included, but Sarah's maid of honor gently redirected me. "The family photos are just for immediate family right now. They'll do extended family and friends later." Immediate family. I was the groom's father, but apparently I wasn't immediate family. I stood outside the church, watching through the garden fence as they posed for pictures, Michael with Sarah, Michael and Sarah with her parents, Sarah with her grandparents, Michael and Sarah with her siblings. At no point did anyone call for the groom's father. Other wedding guests milled around, chatting and laughing, waiting for the reception to begin. I made small talk with a few people, but I didn't really know anyone. Sarah's college friends, Michael's co-workers, distant relatives on her side. Everyone was connected to this celebration except me. Finally, it was time to head to the country club. I followed the line of cars, feeling more alone than I had in years. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. Instead, I felt like an outsider looking in on my own son's celebration. At the country club, I watched as the wedding party made their grand entrance, announced by the DJ as they danced into the reception. Michael and Sarah looked radiant, surrounded by their friends, beginning their new life together. I applauded along with everyone else, but inside, I was already preparing myself for whatever would come next. If the ceremony and photos were any indication, the reception was going to be more of the same, my son's wedding happening around me, without me. I just didn't realize yet how literal that was about to become. The cocktail hour was pleasant enough. I stood with a glass of wine, making polite conversation with other guests, watching Michael and Sarah work the room together. They looked so happy, so perfect together. And Sarah's family surrounded them, taking more photos, sharing stories, laughing at inside jokes I wasn't part of. I kept waiting for Michael to come find me, to introduce me to people as his father, to include me in the celebration somehow. But he was busy, pulled in different directions by well-wishers and photographers. I understood. It was his wedding day. He had a lot of people to see. When the DJ announced that dinner was ready, everyone began moving toward the main dining room. I followed the crowd, looking for the seating chart that would tell me where to sit. Wedding receptions always have seating charts, usually a large board near the entrance with table assignments. I found it easily enough, a beautiful display with ivory cardstock and gold lettering, listing every guest's name alphabetically with their corresponding table number. I scanned the D section for Davidson David. It wasn't there. I looked again, thinking maybe I'd missed it. Davidson. There was no Davidson listed anywhere. I checked under David, thinking maybe they'd organize by first name. Nothing. A cold feeling started growing in my stomach. I checked every name on the board, thinking maybe there had been some mistake. Maybe my name was listed under the wrong letter somehow. I went through every single card. My name wasn't there. I approached the wedding coordinator, a professional-looking woman with a clipboard who was directing guests to their tables. "Excuse me, I can't seem to find my name on the seating chart." "What's the name?" she asked pleasantly. "David Davidson. I'm Michael's father." She checked her master list, running her finger down the names. "I'm sorry, I don't see a David Davidson on the guest list at all." "There must be some mistake. I RSVP'd weeks ago. I'm the groom's father." Her expression shifted from professional pleasantness to concern. "Let me double-check with the bride and groom." They provided the final guest count and seating arrangements. She walked away, leaving me standing by the seating chart while other guests found their tables around me. I watched families sit together, watched friends cluster at assigned tables, watched everyone else belong somewhere while I stood there, invisible and unaccounted for. The wedding coordinator returned with an apologetic expression. "I'm so sorry, sir. There seems to have been some kind of oversight. Let me see what I can do about finding you a spot." Oversight. As if forgetting to include the groom's father in the seating arrangements was just a simple clerical error. I stood there while she surveyed the room, looking for an empty chair anywhere. But every table was full. The guest count had been carefully managed, precisely planned. There was literally no seat for me at my son's wedding reception. Other guests were settling in, spreading napkins on their laps, chatting with their table mates. The wedding party was taking their seats at the head table, and I was still standing by the entrance, holding my wine glass, watching my son's celebration begin without space for me in it. I finally spotted Michael during the cocktail service. He was laughing with his best man, his face flushed with happiness and wine. I walked over to him. "Michael, can I speak with you for a moment?" "Dad, are you having a good time?" "There seems to be some confusion with the seating arrangements. My name isn't on the chart." His face went white. Actually white. For just a moment, I saw panic in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean there's no seat assigned for me. The coordinator can't find my name anywhere." He looked around frantically, as if a solution might present itself. That's impossible. Sarah handled all of that. There must be some mistake." That's what the coordinator said. She's Lotan, oaking for an extra chair, but every table is full. Michael's new wife appeared at his elbow, smiling and radiant until she saw our faces. What's wrong? Sarah, there's some problem with my dad's seating assignment. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, something that made my stomach drop. Oh no, really, I'm so sorry, Mr. Davidson. Let me think. Maybe you could sit anywhere there's an open spot. But there was no open spot. Every chair at every table was occupied by the guests they'd carefully invited and thoughtfully placed. There was no room for me anywhere. I'll figure something out, I said finally. Are you sure? I feel terrible about this, Michael said, but he was already being pulled away by the photographer for more pictures. I spent the dinner hour standing at the back of the room, holding a plate of wedding food that I barely touched. I watched my son's reception unfold in front of me, the toasts, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. I watched families sit together at their assigned tables, watched friends toast the happy couple, watched everyone else participate in the celebration while I stood alone against the back wall. At one point, an elderly woman at a nearby table noticed me standing there. Are you waiting for someone, dear? No, I said quietly. I'm fine here. She looked confused but turned back to her conversation. During the father-daughter dance, I watched Sarah dance with her father, both of them beaming with joy. It was a beautiful moment, tender and sweet, but there was no father-son dance, no acknowledgement of the man who'd raised the groom, who'd been both mother and father to him for most of his childhood. The DJ moved straight from the father-daughter dance to inviting all couples to join them on the dance floor. Michael and Sarah danced surrounded by their married friends, their parents, their extended family, everyone except the one person who'd loved Michael longest. I left during the bouquet toss. I couldn't watch anymore. I couldn't stand in the back of the room, invisible and unwanted, while my son celebrated the most important day of his life. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. Through the windows of the country club, I could see the reception continuing without me, the dancing, the celebration, the joy. My son's new life beginning exactly as he'd apparently planned it, without his father taking up space in it. The drive back to the hotel was the longest 2 miles of my life. I sat in that hotel room until nearly 3 in the morning, still wearing my wedding suit, trying to make sense of what had happened. How does a father get forgotten at his own son's wedding? How does 30 years of love and sacrifice get erased so completely that there's not even a chair saved for you at dinner? At first, I tried to convince myself it really was an oversight. Maybe Sarah had been overwhelmed with planning. Maybe there had been a miscommunication. Maybe Michael thought I was handling my own seating arrangement somehow. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. You don't accidentally forget the groom's father. You don't mistakenly leave off the man who raised your future husband. This wasn't carelessness. This was intentional. I started thinking back over the past 2 years, looking for the signs I'd missed. When did this start? When did I become someone to be managed, rather than included? It began when Sarah moved in with Michael. I remember that first time I visited their apartment after she'd been living there for a month. Little things were different. The photos of Michael and me from his childhood, the ones from his baseball games, his high school graduation, our camping trips, had been moved from the living room to his bedroom. The kitchen table where we used to sit and talk was now set up as Sarah's home office. Space, the apartment felt like hers, not theirs. Sarah was never rude to me. She was always polite, always pleasant. But she had a way of redirecting conversations away from Michael's past, away from stories about his childhood, away from the life he'd lived before she became part of it. I remembered one dinner when I'd started telling her about Michael's Little League days, how he'd been afraid of the ball at first, but became a decent hitter by the end of the season. She'd listened with a smile, but then she'd changed the subject to their future plans, their career goals, their new apartment hunting. The past was less interesting to her than the future they were building together. Michael started calling less frequently after she moved in. Our weekly Sunday phone calls became every other week, then monthly. When I'd call him, she'd answer sometimes and say he was busy, or out, or in the shower. She was never hostile about it, just managing access. I thought about the Christmas before the wedding. For 23 years, Michael had spent Christmas Day with me. It was our tradition. We'd have breakfast together, exchange gifts, watch football, eat too much food. It was the one day of the year that was just ours. But that Christmas, Michael called 2 weeks beforehand to tell me he wouldn't be coming. Sarah's family has this big Christmas celebration, and they really want me to be there. What about our Christmas? Maybe we could do something Christmas Eve instead, just for a few hours? Christmas Eve for a few hours, instead of Christmas Day all day. Our tradition, reduced to a brief visit that wouldn't interfere with his new family's plans. I should have recognized it then. I should have understood what was happening. Sarah wasn't trying to destroy my relationship with Michael. She was trying to build a new life with him, one that didn't include constant reminders of his past. She wanted him to herself, wanted Dee to create their own traditions, their own family unit. And Michael, either out of love for her or fear of losing her, was choosing her vision of the future over his connection to his past. I thought about all the times I'd backed down to keep peace. When they'd stopped coming to my house for dinner, I'd suggested restaurants instead. When Michael stopped calling, I'd learned not to call him too often. When Sarah made subtle comments about Michael being too dependent on me, I'd given him more space. I'd been so afraid of being the interfering father, the clingy parent who couldn't let go, that I'd participated in my own erasure. Every time I stepped back to give them room, they took more room. Every time I tried to be understanding and accommodating, I became a little less necessary. I remembered overhearing part of a conversation between Michael and Sarah about 6 months ago. I'd come by their apartment to drop off some of his old books I'd found in my attic, and they were in the kitchen talking while I waited in the living room. "Your dad seems lonely," Sarah was saying. "Yeah, I know, I feel bad about that. Maybe he needs to find some hobbies or something. It's not healthy for him to be so focused on your life." "He's not that bad. Michael, he calls you every week. He wants to be involved in everything we do. That's not normal for a guy your age. He raised me by himself. We're close." "I get that, but you're 30 years old. You need to establish some independence." Michael had murmured something I couldn't hear, and then they'd changed the subject. But Sarah's words stayed with me. I was too involved, too focused on his life, too present. I was a problem to be managed. So I'd managed myself. I'd called less, visited less, asked fewer questions about their lives. I'd tried to be the kind of father Sarah thought Michael needed, distant enough not to be intrusive, independent enough not to be needy. But instead of earning their respect, I'd made myself dispensable. Instead of proving I could give them space, I'd proven they didn't need me at all. Lying in that hotel bed at 3 in the morning, still wearing my wedding suit, I finally understood what had happened. This wasn't a sudden betrayal. This was the logical end result of 2 years of slow, quiet replacement. Sarah hadn't stolen my son from me. She'd simply built a new life with him, one that had no room for his old life, and I'd helped her do it by disappearing a little more each time they asked for space. The wedding was just the final statement, the moment when it became official. Michael's future didn't include his past, and I was his past. I thought about calling him, demanding an explanation, fighting for my place in his life. But what would I say? That he'd hurt my feelings? That I felt left out? He'd already shown me exactly how much space he wanted to give me in his new life. None. For the first time in 30 years, I felt truly alone. Not lonely. I'd been lonely before, but alone in a way that made me question everything I thought I knew about love and family and what it means to be a father. I'd raised him to be independent, and he was. I'd taught him to make his own decisions, and he had. I'd shown him how to put the people he loved first, and he was doing that, just not with me anymore. The hardest part wasn't feeling rejected. The hardest part was understanding that this was what Michael wanted. This distance, this separation, this new life without his father taking up space in it, this was his choice, and I'd helped him make it. 2 weeks after the wedding, I was back home, trying to return to normal life. I'd gone back to work, back to my routines, back to pretending that everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. I felt like I'd lost something fundamental, something I didn't know how to get back. Linda had been patient with me, letting me process what had happened without pushing for details I wasn't ready to share. But I could see the concern in her eyes when she looked at me. I wasn't the same man who'd driven to that wedding 2 weeks ago. I was leaving the grocery store on a Thursday afternoon when I ran into Tom Patterson, who used to live 2 doors down from me when Michael was growing up. Tom had moved across town a few years ago, but we'd stayed friendly, the way neighbors do. David, good to see you. How are you doing? I'm fine, Tom. How's retirement treating you? Can't complain. Listen, I heard Michael got married a couple weeks ago. That's exciting. Yeah, it was a beautiful ceremony. I bet you're proud. Sarah seems like a lovely girl. I saw her at the hardware store last week, and she mentioned they were planning some kind of dinner party this weekend. Their first as a married couple, she said. That must be exciting for you. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Dinner party? Yeah, at that fancy place downtown. Riverside, I think. She seemed really excited about it. Said they were having both sets of parents, some close friends. Sounded nice. Both sets of parents. Michael and Sarah were hosting their first dinner party as a married couple, and they were including both sets of parents. Except they weren't including both sets of parents, because I hadn't been invited. I made polite conversation with Tom for a few more minutes, then sat in my car in the grocery store parking lot, trying to process this new information. Another celebration, another important moment in my son's life, another event I wasn't welcome at. But this time, something was different. This time, instead of accepting my exclusion and trying to understand it, I felt something else. Not anger exactly, but a kind of quiet determination. I drove straight home and called the Riverside restaurant. Riverside, this is Jennifer. How can I help you? Hi, I'm calling about a reservation for this Saturday night. The Davidson party? Let me check. Yes, we have a reservation for 12 people in our private dining room. 12 people. Michael, Sarah, her parents, probably her siblings, some close friends. An intimate celebration of their new marriage, their new family. Everyone who mattered to them, everyone who belonged in their life now. I'd like to make a reservation for the same night, I said. Certainly. How many people? I looked around my quiet house, thinking about all the people who had been part of Michael's real story. Not the sanitized version Sarah preferred, but the full story. The messy, complicated, beautiful story of how a boy became a man. 50 people, I said. 50? For this Saturday night? Yes. I'd like to reserve your main dining room. There was a pause while Jennifer calculated dates and availability. That's a large party with short notice, but I think we can accommodate you. Would you like to look at our group menu options? That would be perfect. I spent the next 3 days making phone calls. I called Linda first, of course. Then I called Frank from work, and Mrs. Patterson from the neighborhood. I called Michael's old Little League coach, Mr. Rodriguez, who'd taught him how to slide into second base. I called his high school English teacher, Mrs. Chen, who'd encouraged him to write for the school newspaper. I called my cousin Janet from 2 states over, who used to send Michael birthday cards every year and had taught him to play poker during family reunions. I called the neighbors who'd watched him grow up, who'd given him odd jobs raking leaves and shoveling snow. I called my coworkers who'd listened to me worry about his college applications and celebrate his graduation. I called everyone who represented the community that had actually raised my son. The people who'd showed up for his baseball games when I had to work, the people who'd tutored him in math and given him rides home from school and believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. Not all of them could come on such short notice, but most of them could. And more importantly, all of them wanted to. When I explained that I was hosting a celebration dinner for Michael, every single person I called was happy to be included. They remembered him fondly. They were proud of the man he'd become. They wanted to celebrate him. By Friday night, I had commitments from 47 people. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't trying to ruin Michael's dinner or embarrass him in front of Sarah's family. I was doing this because I needed to remind myself, and maybe him, of who I really was and what I'd contributed to his life. For 2 years, I'd been allowing myself to be erased, accepting the role of unnecessary father, stepping back to make room for Sarah's vision of their future. But I wasn't unnecessary. I'd raised a good man, and I'd done it with the help of the entire community of people who'd loved and supported him. Those people deserved to be celebrated too. They deserved to be part of Michael's story, and if Michael and Sarah weren't going to include us in their private celebration, we'd create our own. Saturday evening, I put on the same navy suit I'd worn to the wedding and drove to Riverside Restaurant. The main dining room was beautifully set up for our party. Round tables with white tablecloths, flowers at each setting, soft lighting that made everyone look warm and happy. Linda was already there, greeting people as they arrived. She looked beautiful in a blue dress I'd never seen before, and when she saw me, she squeezed my hand. "You look good," she said quietly. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure." The room filled up quickly. Frank brought his wife. Mrs. Patterson came with a photo album full of pictures of Michael from his childhood. Mr. Rodriguez told stories about Michael's determination on the baseball field. Mrs. Chen talked about his thoughtful essays and his kind heart. We were laughing and sharing memories when I saw him. Michael standing in the doorway between the main dining room and the private dining area, staring at our gathering with a look of complete shock. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then Sarah appeared beside him, her face flushed and confused. They'd obviously discovered our celebration while walking to or from their private room. I excused myself from my table and walked over to them. "Michael, Sarah." "Dad, what is this?" "This is a celebration dinner for you, for the man you've become." "But we're having our own." "I know. This is separate. These are all the people who helped raise you, who've been part of your life. I thought they deserved a chance to celebrate you, too." Sarah looked mortified. Michael looked confused and maybe a little angry. But then something shifted in his expression as he looked around the room. He saw Mrs. Chen, who waved at him with genuine joy. He saw Mr. Rodriguez, who raised his glass in a toast. He saw neighbors and family friends and people who'd known him since he was small. "All these people came for me?" "All these people have always been here for you," I said quietly. "You just stopped noticing." The evening unfolded in ways I never could have predicted. At first, Michael and Sarah returned to their private dining room, and I could hear voices from their party getting more animated, probably discussing the unexpected gathering happening just beyond their doors. But about an hour into our dinner, something beautiful started happening. People from Michael's pizza began approaching him. Mrs. Chen had walked over to say hello when he'd passed through the main dining room to use the restroom. Mr. Rodriguez had intercepted him near the bar to ask about his job and congratulate him on the marriage. Each conversation seemed to surprise Michael. These weren't people trying to intrude on his private celebration. They were people who genuinely cared about him, who had memories and stories and love to share. People who'd been missing from his life, not because they'd stopped caring, but because he'd stopped seeing them. Around 9 o'clock, Michael appeared at my table again. This time, Sarah wasn't with him. "Dad, can we talk? Outside, maybe?" We walked out to the restaurant's patio, where we could speak privately but still hear the sounds of both celebrations continuing inside. "I don't understand why you did this," he said, but his voice wasn't angry anymore. It was confused, maybe hurt. "I did it because I needed to remember who I am," I said. "And maybe I needed you to remember too." "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. This wasn't the time for accusations or blame. This was the time for truth. "Michael, at your wedding, there wasn't a seat for me at dinner. Not because someone forgot, but because no one thought to include me. That's when I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd become unnecessary in your life." His face went white again, just like it had at the wedding. "Dad, that was a mistake." Sarah was overwhelmed with planning, and "It wasn't a mistake, son, and deep down you know it wasn't." We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of truth settling between us. "I love Sarah," he said finally. "I know you do. And she loves me. I can see that. But she thinks I was too dependent on you, that I needed to establish my own identity. What do you think?" He was quiet for a long time, looking back through the restaurant windows at both celebrations, his intimate gathering of new family and chosen friends, and my larger gathering of people from his entire life story. "I think I got confused about what independence means," he said finally. "I thought it meant cutting ties with my past, starting fresh. And now? Now I'm sitting here listening to Mrs. Chen tell stories about high school and Mr. Rodriguez asking about my job, and I realize these people have been proud of me my whole life. They've been cheering for me, and I just disappeared on them." "You didn't disappear, Michael. You just got busy building a new life. That's what you're supposed to do. But I didn't have to erase the old life to do it." "No," I said quietly. "You didn't." We talked for another 20 minutes out on that patio. Not about blame or fault or who was right or wrong, but about what it means to grow up without growing away, about how you can honor your past while building your future, about the difference between independence and isolation. Michael told me about the pressure he'd felt to choose between his old life and his new one, and how choosing Sarah had somehow seemed to require leaving me behind. I told him about how I'd tried so hard not to be clingy or intrusive that I'd made myself disappear. I never wanted you to disappear, Dad. I know, but I did anyway. When we went back inside, Sarah was waiting by the door. She looked uncomfortable but determined. Mr. Davidson, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, Sarah. Yes, I do. I've been trying to help Michael become independent, but I think I went too far. I think I made you feel unwelcome, and that wasn't my intention. I studied her face, looking for insincerity, but I didn't find any. She looked young and overwhelmed and maybe a little ashamed. I was protecting what Michael and I have, she continued, but I didn't realize I was damaging what you and he have. That wasn't fair. Building a marriage is hard work, I said. You're both figuring it out as you go. Would you? Would you and your guests like to join us in the private room? We have plenty of food, and I think I'd like to hear some of those stories about Michael. I looked around the main dining room where my celebration was still going strong. People were laughing and sharing memories and genuinely enjoying themselves. I think people are pretty happy where they are, I said. But maybe you and Michael would like to join us out here for a while. And that's how the evening ended. Not with dramatic reconciliation or immediate forgiveness, but with Michael and Sarah spending the last hour of the night moving between both celebrations. Listening to stories from his childhood, hearing about the community that had helped raise him, being reminded of the full scope of his life story. Sarah seemed genuinely interested in Mrs. Chen's stories about Michael's writing talent, and she laughed at Mr. Rodriguez's tales of his baseball mishaps. By the end of the evening, she was looking at photos with Mrs. Patterson and asking questions about Michael's childhood that she'd never asked before. Michael, for his part, seemed lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying the weight of choosing between his past and his future, and suddenly realized he didn't have to choose. When the evening wound down and people began saying their goodbyes, Michael hugged me, really hugged me, not the brief, obligatory hugs I'd gotten used to. Can we do this more often? He asked. Not the big dinner party, but talking, spending time together. I'd like that. Maybe you and Linda could come to dinner next weekend, at our place? Sarah would be okay with that? Sarah whined. Is to learn to make your pot roast recipe, he said with a smile. Apparently, she's been asking around about what your favorite meals were when I was growing up. As Linda and I drove home that night, I reflected on what had changed and what hadn't. Michael was still married to Sarah, still building his new life, still figuring out how to be a husband. I was still his father, but I was also still the man who had learned not to make himself small for others' comfort. The difference was that we were both clear now about what we wanted from each other. Michael wanted a father who was present but not controlling, involved but not intrusive. I wanted a son who remembered where he came from, even as he built where he was going. We had work to do, both of us. I had to learn how to be part of his life without trying to control it. He had to learn how to honor his past while embracing his future. Sarah had to learn that loving Michael meant accepting all of him, including the man his father had helped him become. But for the first time in 2 years, I felt like we were working on the same project instead of pulling in different directions. We were figuring out how to be family in this new configuration, not just the two of us anymore, but the three of us, plus Linda, plus the community of people who'd always loved and supported him. It wasn't the same relationship we'd had when he was young, and it was just the two of us against the world. But it didn't have to be the same to be good. It just had to be real and honest, and built on love instead of fear. That night, lying in my own bed for the first time in weeks without feeling completely alone, I thought about the difference between being needed and being valued. For years, Michael had needed me, for rides and meals and homework help and emotional support. But somewhere along the way, I'd confused being needed with being loved. Now, maybe for the first time, I was valued instead of needed. Chosen instead of depended upon. Michael didn't have to include me in his life anymore, but he wanted to. That felt like something more solid, something more lasting than the old relationship we'd built on necessity. I was still his father. I always would be. But now I was also a man who knew his worth, who wouldn't disappear quietly to keep peace, who understood that love shouldn't require erasure. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.